Welcome back to World History Explored. I'm your host, Adam Zane. Picture this: turquoise waters meet lush green hills just off the coast of South America. Carnival drums echo through Port of Spain, and calypso rhythms fill the air. Today, Trinidad and Tobago is known for music, oil, and unmatched cultural fusion. But behind this paradise lies one of the most remarkable stories in the Caribbean, a tale of empire, slavery, migration, revolution, and resilience. From the Arawak and Carib peoples who first walked its shores to the enslaved Africans who built its foundations, the Indian indentured laborers who reshaped its culture, and the visionaries who fought for independence, this is a nation born at the crossroads of continents and civilizations. So get comfortable, because we're about to uncover how two small islands became a cultural powerhouse with a global voice. Before Columbus. The first peoples. Long before European ships arrived, Trinidad and Tobago were home to vibrant indigenous civilizations. Archaeological evidence shows settlement going back nearly 7,000 years. The earliest known inhabitants were the Ortwiroid people, who lived as hunter-gatherers, leaving behind shell mounds and tools carved from stone and bone. They were later joined by Arawakan peoples migrating north from the South American mainland, followed by the fierce Caribs, renowned warriors who dominated the Lesser Antilles. Trinidad, lying just 7 miles from Venezuela, served as a natural bridge between South America and the Caribbean. These peoples traded pottery, cotton, cassava, and ornaments made from gold and shell. Tobago, smaller but equally rich in life, was known as Tavaco, named for the tobacco plant that flourished there, a name that may even have inspired the word tobacco itself. When Columbus sailed past in 1498 on his third voyage, he named the larger island La Trinidad, the Trinity, after the 3 peaks he saw on its southern coast. What followed would forever alter the lives of its indigenous peoples. Colonial shadows. Spain's claim. Spain quickly claimed both islands, but for more than a century, they barely bothered to settle them. Trinidad was sparsely populated. Tobago changed hands between nearly every European power: the Dutch, French, British, and even Courlanders from modern Latvia. For Spain, Trinidad was a frontier outpost of the empire, overshadowed by the wealth of Mexico and Peru. Only a few hundred settlers lived there by the 1700s. But things began to change with the cedula of population in 1783, one of the most significant migration policies in Caribbean history. Facing stagnation, Spain invited Catholic immigrants from neighboring islands in Europe to settle in Trinidad, offering land and incentives. Hundreds of French planters and free people of color, fleeing the turmoil of the Haitian Revolution, accepted. They brought enslaved Africans, sugar expertise, and new energy, transforming Trinidad's sleepy colony into a booming plantation economy almost overnight. By the end of the 18th century, enslaved Africans outnumbered Europeans 10-1. Plantations spread across fertile plains, producing sugar, cocoa, and coffee for global markets. But Trinidad's growing prosperity drew British attention. In 1797, during the wars against revolutionary France, a British fleet under Sir Ralph Abercrombie invaded and captured the island with barely a fight. Spain formally ceded Trinidad to Britain in the Treaty of Amiens, 1802. Tobago, meanwhile, had already endured a dizzying colonial merry-go-round, changing hands over 30 times between Europeans before finally settling under British rule in 1814. Thus, the two islands' destinies were set under one empire, yet each with its own distinct past, chains and resistance, the age of slavery. Under British rule, the sugar plantations thrived, built on the brutal labor of enslaved Africans. They were captured, shipped, and sold like property, forced to labor from dawn until dusk in sweltering fields. But resistance burned deep. Trinidad's enslaved people never accepted bondage quietly. They ran to the forests to form maroons, rebelled, and preserved African languages, rhythms, and faiths in secret. A crucial turning point came in 1834, when Britain abolished slavery throughout its empire. Yet freedom came with strings, a 4-year apprenticeship system that kept freed people tied to their former masters. True freedom arrived only in 1838. The end of slavery changed everything. Former slaves left the estates, creating new villages and communities like Laventille and Belmont, where African traditions evolved into new cultural forms. Calypso, steel pan, and carnival all trace their roots to this era of emancipation and creativity. The planters, suddenly deprived of labor, turned elsewhere. And so began a new wave of migration that would redefine Trinidad forever. From India with hope, indentureship, and cultural fusion. Between 1845 and 1917, nearly 150,000 Indians arrived in Trinidad under the British indenture system, a scheme that promised work, wages, and eventual freedom, but often delivered hardship and exploitation. They came from Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Bengal, and Madras, Hindu, Muslim, and Sikh, crossing oceans to fill the labor gap left by emancipation. Each indenture lasted 5 years, with meager pay and harsh conditions. Yet many chose to stay after their contracts ended, building new lives and families. They brought not just labor, but language, religion, cuisine, and festivals. Hindi and Bhojpuri songs, Diwali lights, Eid prayers, and roti and curry that would become national staples. Over generations, their descendants transformed Trinidad's culture, economy, and identity. The encounter between African and Indian communities, often divided by colonial policies designed to prevent unity, shaped the nation's complex social fabric. Tensions and cooperation coexisted, but out of that mosaic emerged a truly unique society, multilingual, multi-ethnic, and proudly hybrid. Tobago, with its smaller population, remained largely African-descended and agrarian, focused on cocoa, fishing, and village life. Yet its traditions, music, and spirituality added essential layers to the twin island identity. Colonial transformation and early nationalism. By the late 19th century, Trinidad and Tobago were administered jointly as one colony, though with striking inequalities. Wealth flowed to planters and merchants. Ordinary citizens, whether African, Indian, or mixed race, had little political voice. But seeds of change were being planted. Education expanded, literacy rose, and a small middle class of teachers, clerks, and professionals emerged, including many of African and mixed descent. The early 20th century brought industrial shifts. The discovery of oil in 1857, followed by commercial drilling in 1908, transformed Trinidad's economy. By the 1930s, oil had become the colony's lifeblood, but the profits went mostly to British companies, while workers faced poverty and discrimination. Frustration erupted in the labor riots of 1937, led by visionary figures like Uriah Buzz Butler, a Grenadian oil field worker and preacher who became the voice of the working class. The strikes spread from oil fields to sugar estates, demanding better wages and dignity. The British colonial government was stunned. These uprisings forced reforms. Trade unions were legalized, and a new political consciousness was born. The dream of self-government was no longer unthinkable. The road to independence. After World War II, the global tide of decolonization reached the Caribbean. Britain, weakened and pragmatic, began granting greater autonomy. In 1956, a charismatic teacher named Eric Williams founded the People's National Movement, PNM, and delivered his legendary address, Massa Day Done. It was a fiery declaration that the age of colonial subservience was over. Williams, a historian educated at Oxford, mobilized Trinidadians across race and class, arguing that self-government was not just a political goal, but a moral necessity. Under his leadership, the PNM won the 1956 elections, setting the stage for independence. Initially, Trinidad and Tobago joined the West Indies Federation, 1958 to 1962, a short-lived experiment in Caribbean unity. When the Federation collapsed, Trinidadians voted for full independence rather than continued colonial rule. On August 31, 1962, the Union Jack was lowered, and the red, white, and black flag of a new nation was raised. Eric Williams became the first Prime Minister. In his independence speech, he declared, The nation of Trinidad and Tobago is now master of its own destiny. Tobago's inclusion was confirmed, forming the twin island republic that exists today, though debates over Tobago's autonomy would continue for decades. Republic, identity, and the modern era of independence did not erase colonial legacies overnight. Ethnic divisions, economic inequality, and external dependence persisted. But the new nation forged ahead with determination. In 1976, Trinidad and Tobago became a republic, replacing the British monarch with its own president as head of state, though it remained within the Commonwealth. The 1970s oil boom brought sudden wealth. The government used revenues to expand education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Yet, when oil prices crashed in the 1980s, the country plunged into recession, exposing over-reliance on petroleum. Social movements blossomed. The Black Power movement of 1970, inspired by global civil rights struggles, challenged racial inequality and demanded cultural pride. Students, workers, and artists united under the banner of power to the people. Music mirrored this awakening. Calypso evolved into soca. Steel pan became a symbol of national pride, and carnival, once suppressed by colonial authorities, grew into one of the world's greatest festivals, a celebration of freedom, creativity, and resistance. Tobago, meanwhile, gained greater self-government with the establishment of the Tobago House of Assembly in 1980, ensuring local control over its affairs while remaining part of the Republic. Challenges and triumphs of a young nation. As the 20th century drew to a close, Trinidad and Tobago faced new challenges: globalization, economic diversification, and environmental change. The discovery of natural gas reserves turned the nation into one of the richest per capita in the Caribbean. Skyscrapers rose in Port of Spain, and the energy sector funded ambitious development projects. But inequality persisted. Rural and inner-city communities often lagged behind. Tensions between Afro-Trinidadian and Indo-Trinidadian political blocs shaped electoral politics. Yet despite divisions, democracy endured. Free elections, peaceful transfers of power, and a vibrant civil society. Culturally, Trinidad and Tobago's influence exploded. The islands produced global icons like Brian Lara in cricket, Nicki Minaj in music, V.S. Naipaul in literature, the first Trinidadian Nobel laureate, and Hazely Crawford, who won the nation's first Olympic gold medal in 1976. Internationally, Trinidad and Tobago became a diplomatic leader, hosting summits, championing climate action, and helping to establish the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, and the Association of Caribbean States. Even natural disasters, hurricanes, floods, and pandemics have tested the nation's resilience, but never its spirit. Trinidad and Tobago. Today, the power of diversity. Today, Trinidad and Tobago stands as a beacon of diversity. Its population, roughly 40% Indian, 37% African, and the rest mixed or of European, Chinese, and Syrian-Lebanese descent, lives side by side in one of the most multicultural societies on Earth. Every year, Carnival transforms the streets into an explosion of color, music, and joy, a living testament to centuries of struggle and survival. Diwali, Eid, Emancipation Day, and Spiritual Baptist Shouter Day all coexist on the national calendar, reflecting a country where many faiths and traditions flourish together. The economy remains heavily tied to energy, but diversification into tourism, finance, and the creative industries continues. Education levels are high, and the Human Development Index ranks among the best in the developing world. Yet the nation also faces modern dilemmas: youth unemployment, crime, and balancing industrial growth with environmental protection. The conversation about national identity continues. What does it mean to be Trinidadian or Tobagonian in a globalized world? Perhaps the answer lies in what Trinidadian historian Lloyd Best once said: "We are not a people without history. We are a people in the process of becoming conclusion, from colonies to culture capital." So, what makes Trinidad and Tobago's story so extraordinary? It's not just about colonization and independence, it's about transformation. From the first Amerindian settlers to Spanish missionaries, African slaves, Indian laborers, and modern citizens, every generation has contributed a verse to the national story. It's the story of how two islands, bound by history and hope, turned pain into rhythm and oppression into art. Of how a people once divided by empire built unity through music, faith, and celebration. When you listen to a steel pan band or watch masqueraders dance through the streets of Port of Spain, you're not just seeing a festival. You're witnessing the triumph of history, creativity, and identity. Trinidad and Tobago may be small in size, but its influence is vast, echoing through every calypso song, every cricket match, every moment of cultural pride across the Caribbean and beyond. Closing message. So, is Trinidad and Tobago just another post-colonial state, or something more? It's a reminder that identity is not inherited. It's created, celebrated, and defended. What do you think? How did the fusion of so many peoples and traditions create one of the world's most vibrant nations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Caribbean history, hit that like button and subscribe to World History Explored for more stories about how the past still shapes our present. Until next time, keep exploring history, because as Trinidad and Tobago's journey shows, it's never really over.